Hey there, comic colleagues and superhero supporters. What if I told you that there's a universe where Aunt May is killed instead of Uncle Ben? What if I also told you that because of this, Spider Man's secret identity is almost revealed to the public? Interested? Well, let me tell you about it. What If Spider Man's Uncle Ben Had Lived is the 46th issue in the 1997 What If series. In this issue, we ask the question, what if Aunt May bit the bullet on that tragic night instead of Uncle Ben? We begin this alternate account with Peter Parker lamenting over a mysterious headstone, and once finished, he walks over to a hidden figure. Shortly after these events, it's revealed that the hidden figure is in fact Ben Parker, leaving the headstone to be revealed as May Parker's. We are then thrown into a telling of the fateful day that Aunt May was murdered. In the dead of night, Aunt May is awakened by a mysterious noise and decided to check it out for herself. She is surprised to find that a burglar has made their way into her residence. When Aunt May startles the criminal, he fires a shot, hitting her directly. Uncle Ben hurries to the loud sound from downstairs, but he's too late. May was already gone. Time passes, and both Peter and Ben are taking the death of Aunt May hard. Peter has fully immersed himself in his new identity as Spider-Man, making the relationship between him and Uncle Ben grow distant. This is until Ben learns of Peter's crime-fighting secret. He tries to make this realization known to his nephew through subliminals, but when the hints aren't enough, Ben decides to confront Peter head-on about his secret identity. Peter confides in his uncle and recounts how he allowed the burglar to escape a crime that he had committed earlier, and how that ultimately caused the death of Aunt May. When Peter states that he feels guilty for doing nothing to stop the burglar, we learn that Ben also feels shame and guilt due to him being asleep when May was killed. Empathizing with the pain he must feel, Peter consoles his uncle, and the two embrace in a heartwarming family moment. Afterwards, the two decide that they will take on the responsibility of protecting those in need, together. In the coming weeks and months, Spider-Man takes on his most terrible foes, such as Sandman, the Lizard, and the Green Goblin, in order to carve out a name for himself and show New York that he's the hero the city needs. And this works for the most part. However, there is one man who won't let the wall crawler off so easily, and that man is none other than Jonah Jameson. In true JJ fashion, he begins to publish negative headlines about Spider-Man being a criminal. This slandering of the webhead's good name angers Uncle Ben, claiming that this is not only disrespectful to Spider-Man, but also insults the memory of the late May Parker. Although Peter tries to calm down and talk some sense into his uncle, the rage overwhelms him. Ben storms out of the house and makes his way to the Daily Bugle in order to confront the boisterous businessman. Once arriving at the newspaper company, Ben fights his way to the head honcho himself and gives him a piece of his mind. Spider-Man arrives shortly after to break up the squabble, but has no success. After some back and forth, Ben finally deals his last hand to shock JJ into understanding that Spider-Man is indeed a good man. He removes the hero's mask, revealing to Jameson that Spider-Man is actually mild-mannered photographer Peter Parker. Peter and Ben then flee the scene, leaving the editor-in-chief to ponder on what he just saw. After some deep thought, JJ concludes that he can use this newfound knowledge to his advantage monetarily, and decides to work hand in hand with Spider-Man. As long as Spider-Man tips JJ off to crimes occurring so that his reporters can be the first on the scene, he will refrain from posting slanderous headlines of Spider-Man. All goes well at first. That is until Jameson attempts to pressure Peter into tailing his current love interest, Betty Brant. When Jameson tries to tell Peter that Miss Brant is up to no good and is in fact dealing with some shady characters, Peter lashes out on JJ and storms out of his office. Shortly after, Peter arrives at his humble abode to seek counsel from Uncle Ben. When Ben ultimately agrees with JJ, this pushes Peter over the edge. He brushes his uncle off and proceeds to have a tantrum on the New York City rooftops. Once he's able to regain his composure, Peter decides that he will tail Betty Brant after all, only to prove that both Jameson and Uncle Ben are wrong. However, Spider-Man is up for a rude awakening when he sees that Betty is in fact dealing with the likes of Dr. Octopus and Blackie. Now, if you're wondering who Blackie is, then I must inform you that I'm also doing the same. Why would they name this man Blackie? Anyways, Spider-Man springs into action, stopping the villain's plan before they can even begin. And although Miss Brant was being coerced into working with the deadly duo, Spider-Man can't even stand to look at her, due to him not knowing what to trust anymore. This heartbreak causes Spidey to spiral into depression. He gives up being Spider-Man and decides to become a smelly alley bum instead. But when a man hired by Triple J finds Spider-Man and threatens that Jameson will expose his identity if he doesn't meet at the Bugle, Spidey swings over with little hesitation. However, during the discussion between Spidey and the hired man, a figure can be seen, lurking and listening in the background. This indistinguishable eavesdropper is then revealed to be the Green Goblin. Having heard the whole conversation, he devises a plan to kidnap J. Jonah Jameson while he's visiting his son in the hospital and torture him until he reveals the identity of his most hated foe. When the plan goes off without a hitch, Peter is left conflicted in his feelings. At first, he refuses to save Jonah, but when JJ Jr. takes the call to action with his newfound powers, Peter eventually decides to do the right thing and help save Jonah. But once Spider-Man arrives, he sees that Osborn has already been defeated by JJ Jr. However, there is a new problem afoot. Jr.'s new powers have had an adverse effect on his mind and are causing him to go on a blind rampage. Spider-Man confronts JJ Jr. and counteracts his powers, and also somehow saves his life by accidentally electrocuting him. He then frees JJ Sr. and claims that the distraught father owes him one. We end the story with Ben reading the newspaper and Peter having a morning cup of joe. The men share a moment, promising each other that whatever comes next in their lives, the two will get through it, and they will do so together. Peter and Ben then solidify this promise with a firm handshake and an iconic "Nuff said." Well, there you have it, folks. Uncle Ben lives, Peter becomes a homeless man temporarily, and Jonah escapes his consequences once again. I think this what if was done very well, and was a story that needed to be told. One aspect of this story that caught my attention was Uncle Ben's sense of justice and guilt. Being able to see Uncle Ben alive and learn how he reacts and interacts to people and events in this story really shines a light on where Peter gets his values from, and the type of man he wants to shape himself into. If I were to be honest, I'd like to see a continuation of this alternative timeline. I enjoyed the dynamic between Ben and Peter. How Ben would guide Peter and even stick up for him is something we don't really see in Aunt May's relationship with Peter, so I found it to be quite refreshing. If you enjoy Spider-Man or what-if stories, you should definitely give this one a read. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and a comment. Also, make sure to follow and subscribe for more comic coverage.